This is a particularly pertinent, since we were talking about tables, about what they can do. So, the modern Excel concept is, I think it was put forth initially by Rob Collie, Power Pivot Pro, also a native Ohioan, so good guy. So the basics, or the basic part of modern Excel is that, you know, we have this sort of traditional mindset, this sort of old school view of Excel, and so Excel 2013 especially, but some 2010, has put forth these new items such as Power Pivot, Power Query, Power View, Excel web app, Excel services. So a lot of this business intelligence stuff. So his view of modern is more of these business intelligence items, and he actually has, like, what he says is a checklist, and not so much the traditional pivots, the VLOOKUP, SUMIFs, interactive solutions driven by macros. So just to kick off the discussion, because I actually very much agree with him in spirit on this idea of what modern Excel is, and that we are still very mired in these old ways. And I mean, I look at the stuff people put out in Excel, and it sort of reminds me of Windows 3.1. But you know, my bread and butter is VBA, and maybe this is my own bias, but I still think there's room for VBA and these type of formulas within the modern concept. In fact, I almost wonder if only in a few years from now there won't be, you know, DAX and formulas will converge into the same thing. So, discuss.
Well, when you mentioned VBA the way that you did, I have a question about, you know, I've been told that leave VBA alone. JavaScript is the future of Excel programming.
I mean, I've heard that. That's, you know, if you're doing web applications, and obviously JavaScript and jQuery, there's a lot more object-oriented parts to that. So there is something to be said about that. But so
web apps.
Yep. So Rick, you know, as a business intelligence person, what is your view? I mean, as Excel as a business intelligence platform, are those old methods? Are they modern? I shouldn't say old methods. Now they're not modern if they're old.
Sure. So I'll give you my thoughts on that. Whenever I go in to talk to a client around business intelligence, one of the first things that we do, and there are lots of different kind of business intelligence maturity models that are out there, right? To where you take wherever you're at, and you can kind of look at that on a paradigm or look at that on a maturity model and see and almost predict what sort of problems you're going to run into. And there are two big problems that people primarily run into, and I believe this hits on the first one. And this hits on the first one is where almost all business intelligence projects die, in my opinion. The first place that they could possibly die. And that is where people out in the field, people who are out using Excel or access databases or anything of that nature, whenever there's a big business intelligence deployment, those people out in the field see it as a threat. And so as a result of seeing it as a threat, they tend to compete against it. And so the way that you get past that so that your project doesn't die is you have to build either things into your business intelligence environment that are at least 50% better than what people could do on their own, right? You need to bring them in instead of seeing them as competition. The reason I bring that up is I think that it's critical to not only talk to the Excel users, but I see this modern Excel, I guess to use that term, this modern Excel is a way of enabling the Excel user so they can do more than they can do today, right? To enable them so they don't, so basically they become part of the business intelligence deployment instead of competing against it. Yeah, that's the way that I see that it's going right now, and you can kind of see that with Microsoft, and they've, in my opinion, Microsoft has done this since the beginning of time. You know, they've taken whatever their environment is, whatever their structure is, whatever their platform is, and in this case we could talk about that being the SQL Server, and use that to basically to dominate. You know, and they did this with Microsoft. Microsoft kind of did this with, you know, in getting rid of Netscape just by putting a little add-on, Internet Explorer. And I kind of see that being the same thing with what they're doing with Excel and connecting it to SQL Server, to where if people are already using Excel day in and day out and you already have SQL Server, then why not take advantage of the things that are going on with modern BI, and it would pretty much muscle out any BI competition that's out there. So, you know, as a BI guy, that's the way I see it. That's the way I see modern BI in my mind, as just being, being that if they could combine those two things in a very powerful way, there's no way anybody would be able to compete with Microsoft.
Now, I don't know enough about the formal BI tools, but I want to ask you to elaborate on that. Do you mean muscle out things like SSAS, or what other kind of things are you talking about?
Right. I see SSAS as being part of it. You know, I see it as being you know, as I think of Power Pivot and things of that nature, it's really how can you enable the end user? How can you enable the end user who already has their hands in Excel every single day?
Right.
And how can you enable them so that they're connecting to SQL Server and as a result are connecting to SSAS, connecting to a lot of the transformations that are done in SSIS and a lot of those other tools. So I really don't see it as a competition with SQL Server at all. I see it as being Microsoft getting this right is really a competition for other competitors of Microsoft.
Okay. All right.
I mean, in my mind, they really have a competitive advantage right now with Microsoft and how SQL Server has been throughout is you know, installed in a lot of different organizations already.
So just taking this back, so Szilvia, so remember you said that Excel has sort of always been around either on a clay tablet, you know, some sort of spreadsheet. So going back to this modern idea, is there, you know, solve it for us. Is there a modern Excel? Because if there's a few, because you were saying, you know, they're all part of the same thing, you know, is modern Excel actually just Excel?
Well, sure, it's Excel, but a modern incarnation, meaning, you know, there's more things we can do with it. It's more powerful. Meaning more, I think there's more opportunities. There's more opportunities for a lot of people who only have a certain skill set to take it to the next level. And the other thing that's kind of converging with that is, you know, all the talk of big data and you know, companies now have the opportunity to either harness that big data or not. Now, one might argue big data doesn't mean better data. It still means you have to sift through a lot of crap to find the diamonds in the rough. But, you know, I think the opportunities really lie in the talent who's, you know, the people who are going to be able, of course, you know, I'm biased here because I'm talking about people like us, but the opportunities lie in how can we, you know, how can we use this to our competitive advantage, all this information that's out there. So modern, the way that I look at it as not so much, you know, because there's a few new bells and whistles, but thinking about how we use the tools differently. Somebody had made a comment that has stuck with me. I think it might have been on Rob's blog recently, who referred to this era as a bring your own reporting tools kind of world. So, you know, so I don't get too into the debates about, you know, Tableau, Excel, blah, 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 you know, because I'm not sure it has to be one or the other. I think, you know, if you're a professional who sells the idea that you can, you know, turn information into insights. I know it's kind of a cliche. Got to come up with a better one. But if that's your thing, then whatever, you know, your weapon of choice. Then, but I think Excel is always going to be part of the equation. We've all heard, or something like it. Who knows? Maybe it'll be called something different in the future. But we've all heard the thing about what is it? The second most common button, or, you know, after open and or after, what is it? Help me out here. There's download to Excel is like the third most common
after cancel and
any system, you know, and if it can't be downloaded into Excel, well, you know, good luck selling that product, right? So that's why I'm not worried that at least, you know, until I'm retired, it's kind of here to stay. Yeah.
So I'll just get the round table, the panel on this. So if we never saw VLOOKUP again, would that be a good world or a bad world, or would it not make a difference in your life? Because I was thinking about getting a license plate that said VLOOKUP on it, and I don't want to.
That's so
invest in something that's going away.
In a few years, that'll be like so retro. It'll be kind of hipster. Yeah, it may go away because, you know, as those of us who follow the whole Power Pivot thing, when you design your data models, right, it's almost like, you know, When you go into that data view, it looks like access, right? And so instead of
Right.
VLOOKUP, you're drawing lines between fields to create relationships. And this is, of course, a mind-boggling concept to people who live and breathe Excel every day, and they haven't heard of Power Pivot because they're like, what do you mean VLOOKUP is going away? And I've been throwing that out there in recent seminars that I've been doing, just because people are so into VLOOKUP, and sometimes you gotta say something to blow their minds, and this is a mind-boggling concept. So I wonder if it's just going to morph into something more, more visual in terms of setting up the data model. In fact, I'm getting a little bit off track here, but I was going to ask you about VBA, because VBA hasn't really modernized in terms of how it's done in the whole time I've known VBA. So do you foresee a future where it could be a more kind of visual thing where you write code visually? Do you know what I'm saying?
You mean, well, no, I'm sorry, I don't.
Like a drag and drop VBA.
Yeah, like drag and
yeah.
drop, or have like more kind of pre-packaged functionality, so it's not so code heavy.
Right.
Type of code.
I would say that they're not going to. I just don't see that in VBA. I mean, maybe as Microsoft moves towards the web apps, that could be something with their WYSIWYG editors. But VBA is, I would love for them to update it to make it well, there's a lot of things I'd want from it, but I just know they're not going to do it. I mean, there's basically the only things they add are to represent the new features as a new Excel, new Excel versions come out. So, Oz and Rick, any thoughts on VLOOKUP and the future of formulas and DAX?
I used to get sucked into debates about VLOOKUP versus index match, and these are all tools, right? Whatever gets you going, right? And there are people that don't have Excel 2013, people who don't have Power Pivot. I haven't made use of much Power Pivot myself at all because I don't deal with volumes of data. I don't deal with complex tables of data. I have used the diagram view in Power Pivot to create relationships, but without Power Pivot in Excel 2013, I could create relationships in a drop-down box in native Excel, right? So it depends on what you're trying to do. And for the kind of work that I've done, it's not called for much Power Pivot. I write more VBA code to, say, scrape web pages. Now, maybe I could put the results into Power Pivot. I don't know, but the core has been writing code to scrape web pages. Or a client that has some wild calculation that he's got to be able to make, right? Some prorated this and different kind of users, and what if they put in this and on this date? Now I've got to write all of those formulas. Not necessarily a Power Pivot thing. So again, for what I've had to do, and my workshop students, a lot of them, they're in Excel 2003, 2007. VLOOKUP pulls their ass out of the fire. And yes, I have seen where many thousands of VLOOKUPs have crashed the website, but a certain kind of person has that much data and is trying to make that many VLOOKUPs. So, there's your regular old screwdriver for 99 cents, and then your power drill, your power thing that you got to go to Home Depot and spend $60 for. What are you trying to do?
Exactly. All I know, Matt, is when VLOOKUP goes away, there's going to be like a serious period of mourning, because I don't know about you guys, but when I've talked to people in there's something with human resources and people who hire people for jobs that they have this in their head that advanced Excel equals pivot tables, macros, and VLOOKUP. So people are very emotionally attached to VLOOKUP. They feel like we have to learn VLOOKUP today. If there's nothing you can't, if there's one thing you can teach us before going home, it's VLOOKUP. So I don't know, but there's going to be a period of mourning.
I can tell you, Jordan, my thought on this is I think it's the natural evolution, right? I think that, yes, I think VLOOKUP as a calculation should always be there, and it likely always will be. But I think there's a natural evolution from, and this isn't just in Excel. This is any tool that you're using for reporting purposes, right? And the first part of the evolution is to where you're writing formulas, and you're writing, we'll say formulas or calculations, and you're doing that in the presentation layer, right? You're doing that in the report, no matter what the reporting tool might be, and in this case, Excel, where you're doing all the calculations in that layer. And the problem with that is that if you, is once you have 50 different worksheets, right, and you have 50 different workbooks, and you have to remember, if you make a change in one, you have to remember every place else that calculation is at. Right, and so as a result, you need to think about every spreadsheet and where it could be, and to use Oz's term, to get your ass out of the fire. One of the ways that ends up evolving is how do you create an environment to where eventually that becomes too much of a risk for a larger business, and you push that calculation into the database. And so that's what I see Power Pivot, kind of modern Excel, doing, is pushing that calculation into a place to where it can cascade to all of your spreadsheets, and in that kind of an environment. Once your business has evolved to that,
oh, I got stuck.
It's part of a natural evolution for me.
Right.
Okay.
All right, so I'll make one last one. I know we're really over on the time we had initially thought of here, but okay. So going to modern Excel, so VLOOKUP goes away. There's a part of me that wonders, if VLOOKUP goes away, it's going to be it's almost like a little less complicated. It's a little easier for the user. So, what about my job, I
want to go back to something that
okay, sorry.
Szilvia mentioned that about, VBA going away. Are people seeing VBA as this holy thing? Well, what I think it speaks to is a common thing that has slipped people up, right? Because for years or months or whatever, they have been manually matching things, right? I had a client that sent 2 people over 2 days to a Starbucks to match up a bunch of columns and cells, and after 2 days, they were a quarter through it. Whereas I had, the wherewithal to use VBA, and I was done in 45 minutes once I got everything set up. Okay, so that's where it's not so much the VLOOKUP itself as much as it's the heavens opened up, and the VLOOKUP happened to be the key that unlocked that door, right? So yeah, something will come along and replace the VLOOKUP, and yeah, data models in Excel 2013, yeah, oh yeah, but now the issue is getting more people to use 2013.
So, but you think the future, is the future getting harder for the average person to sit down and pick up, so not, we do it, we consult and use it, and there's people, Excel experts, who use it every day, but so someone new comes to a company, is it getting harder to work with all this large swath of data, or is it getting easier? Do you know what I mean? Like, does Power Pivot make things harder as we get rid of VLOOKUP? Does it make it easier, or is it about the same?
I think, well, the way that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if that's the question, because a lot of things that I've noticed, and my friend Kedra Cheney, who does a lot of Google Analytics, talks about the people who are having to work with a lot of data, they weren't ready for it. They got good at something and got promoted, and they got their more money and their bigger desk, and now here's all this damn data.
They got paid.
Right.
And they don't even know if it's right or not. Let us know. It doesn't, like to your point, Oz, about it's not so much about VLOOKUP or any other specific formula for that matter. Another kind of fun fact that I like to remind my attendees at my classes and stuff is I believe it was Price Waterhouse, or it might have been one of those other big consulting firms that did a white paper study on just commercial spreadsheets. How accurate are they? And upwards of 90% had errors in them. So I think the larger picture problem is just data literacy. That combined with the heavy reliance on Excel as not just the reporting end, which is what it should be, but managing everything on the back end too, which just opens up all kinds of opportunities for error and risk for companies not knowing what their numbers are, or and how to make intelligent decisions. And I think that will get more challenging if you believe all the big data hype and stuff. I think that is only going to get more challenging as you have more stuff to manage.
Right, and I think that says something more about the environment than it does about Excel as a tool.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm with you, Oz.
Yeah, it's just things like comparing two lists. Let's check the master list against the people who RSVP that they're coming, right?
Yes.
Now let's go the other way, and then the other way weird stuff comes out, and that means what?
Right.
But you got to have the presence of mind to check it the other way, and what does this mean when this weird stuff shows up? And I don't care if you're doing it on a wall with crayons. You got to be able to think like that.
Right. I'm with you.